Hello there. As the night deepens, let us leave the worries of the long day behind and journey together to a distant memory, to the place where myths began. In every culture, mythology is more than just ancient lore. It is the very soul of a people, reflecting how the ancients perceived the universe and the essence of life itself. In China, a vast land cradling thousands of years of history mythology is like a garden of wildflowers, radiant, tangled, and shrouded in mystery. Because these tales were passed down through centuries of oral tradition, Chinese mythology does not follow a single structured system like the Greek myths we often know. Instead, it lives through many versions, sometimes fragmented at times, even contradictory. Yet it is this very richness that creates its unique allure. Ancient myths blend seamlessly with Taoist legends, weaving a realm where the celestial and the mortal blur into a dreamlike reality. On our journey tonight, we are not searching for historical facts or rigid chronologies. I simply want to share with you the most beautiful and ethereal stories so that you may lose yourself in the wonder of ancient wisdom. You see, the gods in the minds of the early Chinese were quite distinct. They did not always possess the perfect human forms of a Zeus upon Mount Olympus. In that dawn of creation, deities like Fuxi or Nüwa often appeared as half human and half beast, with human heads and the bodies of serpents carrying the raw primal breath of nature. In that world, the boundary between the divine and the human was fragile and thin. Emperors of great virtue could ascend to godhood, and gods would often descend to earth to guide humanity. We often hear of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the divine rulers who sparked the flame of civilization and led mankind out of the primordial darkness. No matter how much the ancient texts may differ in their details, the reverence for them remains unchanged through the ages. With no single supreme ruler, Chinese mythology is a vast, shimmering river of countless enchanting fragments. And tonight, in the stillness of the dark, I will take your hand and lead you into that flow, so that together we may gaze upon the dawn of humanity. Are you ready to begin? Take a deep breath, let your body soften and relax, and let us begin our journey. The ancient Chinese believed that before the universe took shape, everything was merely a realm of nothingness. There was no brilliant light, nor was there any consuming darkness. There was only chaos. Imagine, if you will, a thick, endless mist covering everything. It possessed no specific shape, no color, no sound, and no taste. It was deep dark and so profoundly mysterious that no one could fathom its depths. It was a state of ambiguity, a place where every sense would drift into a deep, dreamless slumber. In the ancient text known as the Zhuangzi, there is a philosophical fable about the ruler of this central realm, a being named Hundun, or Chaos. This king was quite special. He had no eyes, no ears, nor a nose or mouth like you and I. He simply existed in peace, carefree, and unburdened within the void. His 2 friends were Shu, the ruler of the Southern Ocean, and Hou, the ruler of the Northern Ocean. They often came to visit him, wishing to help Chaos see, hear, and feel the vibrant world. Just like everyone else, they decided to carve 7 openings into him, representing the 7 senses. Each day that passed, they carved 1 opening. And on the 7th day, when the final sense was awakened, Chaos faded away. His passing was in truth the very moment that signaled the birth of the universe, ending the long eons of sleeping within the misty fog. And from within that endless chaos, the legend of Pangu began. The ancient chronicles tell us that the chaotic realm at that time curled in upon itself, resembling a gigantic cosmic egg. Inside this egg, life was silently germinating. Unknown to time, Pangu had come into being curled up and sleeping soundly within the shell. This slumber lasted for a staggering 18,000 years. In that absolute silence, Pangu continued to grow his form, becoming more magnificent with every passing moment. Until one day, when the shell of chaos could no longer contain his immense form, the egg cracked open. A great sound resounded, shaking the void. From that moment, the energies of yin and yang, which had been intertwined, were finally separated. The clear light yang energy floated gently upward, transforming into the vast, boundless sky. The heavy, turbid yin energy sank downward, condensing into the solid, steady earth. Between this newly formed heaven and earth stood Pangu, towering and majestic. With his hands propping up the sky and his feet planted firmly on the ground, he feared that heaven and earth might close up again. And so he persisted, standing there, straining his muscles to hold them apart. With each passing day, the sky grew 10 feet higher, the earth grew 10 feet thicker, and Pangu's body grew taller to match them. And so it went for another 18,000 years of solitude. Pangu had now become a giant beyond imagination, stretching for 90,000 miles. Thanks to his unwavering perseverance, the distance between the sky and the earth was now exactly that height, vastly separated and incredibly stable. But even the greatest strength must eventually find its rest. When the heavens and the earth were firmly established, Pangu finally fell. And it was then that the greatest miracle of all took place. His body did not simply disappear. Instead, it transformed into this beautiful world we know. Listen closely to these magical transformations. His final breath became the gentle winds and the drifting clouds. His voice echoed forth, becoming the rolling thunder that heralds the rain. His left eye rose high, blazing brilliantly to become the sun that warms the world. His right eye shone with a gentle glow, becoming the silvery moon that lights our path through the dark night. His limbs and body transformed into the 4 poles of the earth and the 5 sacred mountains, Mount Tai, Mount Hua, Mount Song, Mount Heng, and Mount Heng standing guard over the vast lands. His blood flowed out, creating winding rivers and the boundless oceans. His veins became the cool, refreshing underground springs. His flesh turned into fertile, rich fields. His hair and beard became the myriad of stars twinkling in the heavens. Even the sweat falling from his brow transformed into the rain and the glistening morning dew on the leaves. And the tiny spirits that had taken shelter upon his form, nurtured by his divine essence, became the ancestors of us, the human race. The story of Pangu reminds us of the giant Ymir in Norse mythology, whose body also became the world. But unlike Ymir, who fell in battle, Pangu departed voluntarily peacefully, like drifting into a long sleep after completing a great mission of creation. The ancient Chinese people always took pride in being the descendants of this great deity. Although later the story of the goddess Nüwa crafting humans from clay is told more often, the image of Pangu standing between heaven and earth, sacrificing his very self so that all things could flourish, remains the most magnificent song of the primordial dawn. Here is the translation for part 2, continuing with the same soothing melodic tone, designed to guide the listener into a peaceful slumber. When Pangu had finally faded into the mountains, rivers, and trees, the world, though shaped, remained vast and silent. Amidst this primal quietude, a magnificent goddess emerged. Her name was Nüwa, The ancients whisper that Nüwa possessed a beauty both strange and majestic. In the oldest stone carvings, she appears not merely as human, but with the head of a woman and the body of a serpent, or sometimes a dragon. This form, half human and half beast, symbolized the sacred union between the divine and the raw, untamed power of nature. For in the minds of the ancients, dragons and serpents were the most spiritual of creatures, representing the very origins of life. The ancient text, Zi, tells us that Nüwa was born from the heart of the vast Mother Earth, carrying within her the gentle, nurturing energy of Yin. One day, as she wandered through the boundless but empty world, she felt a longing for companionship, a desire to make the world more vibrant. She paused by the edge of a quiet pool and knelt down, scooping up handfuls of fine yellow clay. With hands both skillful and meticulous, Nüwa mixed the earth with water, molding the shapes one by one. And then when she breathed the breath of life into them, the clay figures suddenly stirred, laughed, and spoke. These were the very first humans. But the world was immense, and the goddess's strength had its limits. If she were to mold every single person by hand, how long would it take to fill the earth? Exhausted Nüwa devised a new way. She dipped a long vine into a pool of thin mud. Standing tall, she swung the vine through the air and flicked it gently. As the droplets of mud fell to the ground and touched the spiritual air, they too transformed into people. Legend says that the figures molded carefully from the yellow clay became the noble and wealthy, while those born from the scattered droplets of mud led humbler, harder lives. It was the ancient way of explaining the different paths of fate, an arrangement decided at the very dawn of time. However, the early universe was not yet truly at peace. The text Huinanzi records a terrifying catastrophe. There came a time when the four poles of the earth suddenly collapsed. The sky tore open, revealing gaping giant black voids. In that moment, the cosmic order was overturned. Green forests turned into seas of fire, and dark waters surged from the deep, causing a great flood to drown all things. Ferocious beasts and birds of prey emerged from the shadows, threatening the fragile existence of tiny humanity. Witnessing this, Nüwa's motherly heart broke with sorrow. She decided she must save her creation. Picture this magnificent and shimmering scene in your mind. Nüwa traveled far and wide, gathering stones of 5 brilliant colors: blue, yellow, red, white, and black. Using sacred fire, she smelted them into a glowing multicolored mortar. She flew high into the air, using this magical substance to patch the holes in the heavens. This is why even today, when we look up and see radiant, colorful clouds, we are seeing the traces of those sacred stones from long ago. After mending the sky, she looked down at the tilting earth. Nüwa found a giant divine turtle. She used its 4 legs as pillars to prop up the 4 corners of the sky, making the earth stable once more. She burned reeds and used the ash to dam the overflowing floods. Finally, she drove away the dark dragons and beasts, sending them back to the deep forests, returning peace to mankind. Once the heavens and earth were calm, to ensure that humans would not vanish with time, Nüwa established the sacred institution of marriage. She taught men and women how to love and pair off so that life would continue generation after generation. Because of this, later generations revered her as the high matchmaker, the goddess who presides over love and unions. In the warmth of spring days, young men and women would often go to her temple to pray for their soulmates or for a home filled with children. Her great mission complete, Nüwa quietly prepared to depart. Some books say her body transformed into 10 guardian spirits, but other texts like the Huainanzi tell a more ethereal ending. Nüwa boarded a thunder chariot, pulled by winged dragons, and drifted gently up to the ninth heaven. She returned to the celestial realm, leaving behind a clear blue sky and a peaceful earth. To this very day, when the rain falls steadily, people still remember her. They might make simple cakes to place on their roofs or hang dolls upon brooms, whispering a wish that she might return to mend the storms of life. Imagine, if you will, that you are suspended in the quiet air, looking down upon the world from above. Embracing the land on all four sides is a vast, boundless ocean, its deep blue waters stretching beyond the reach of the eye. This great expanse is divided into the four great seas: the east, the west, the south, and the north. Resting in the very center of these waters lies the Earth Square, solid and immovable. Do you remember the giant divine turtle from the story of Nüwa? Its 4 legs have now become the 4 sturdy pillars that keep this floating world stable above the waves. Above it all, the sky curves like a gigantic inverted bowl, perfectly round and infinitely high, enveloping the square earth below. The ancients called this harmony round sky and square earth. But the sky is not simply a single sheet of blue. It is thick, deep, and layered. It is divided into 9 distinct celestial sectors. In the center reigns the central heaven. To the east lies the lush azure heaven. To the north, the deep and shadowy dark heaven. To the west, the brilliant white heaven. And to the south, the scorching vermilion heaven. This celestial dome is constructed of 9,900 corners stacked upon one another to form the 9 layers of clouds. The highest layer, the most distant and sacred of all, is known as the 9 Heavens, the dwelling place of the celestial emperor, a realm where the light never fades. Between the vastness of heaven and earth, the connection is strong. Rising from the ground are 8 colossal mountains so tall that their peaks vanish into the clouds. These are the pillars of heaven. Millions of years have drifted by, and the names of most of these mountains have faded from human memory. We remember only 2 legendary names, Mount Buzhou and Mount Kunlun. It is said these sacred peaks lie in the far northwest, shrouded in mist all year round. No mortal foot has ever touched their summits, for they are the sanctuaries of the gods, solemn, silent, and forbidden. To keep the heavens and earth from shifting, 4 giant celestial cords hang down from the sky at the 4 corners of the world, anchoring the 4 directions against the cosmic storms. But the most magical secret of this ancient world lies in the hidden pathways that once connected the mortal realm to the divine. These were the sky ladders. The most beautiful of these was a giant tree known as the Jianmu. Let your mind drift to the land of Duguang, a place considered a paradise within the human world. There, the climate is eternally mild. The winds are gentle and the clouds are soft. The grains grow round and glossy, fragrant as if dipped in oil. Mythical birds, the luan and the phoenix, gather there to dance and sing. In the center of this enchanted land, the Jianmu tree rises. Legend tells us it was planted by the Yellow Emperor himself. The tree has no spreading branches. Instead, it possesses a single unique trunk that twists and winds, climbing higher and higher until it pierces the clouds. Its leaves are a deep azure, slender as thorns. Its flowers are a mysterious, elegant black, while its fruit glows yellow, sparkling like precious gems. The Jianmu grows at the exact center of the world, perfectly aligned with the center of the sky. Because of this, at high noon, when the sun shines directly down upon its crown, you will find no shadow at its base. It stands there, towering, shadowless, and silent, a sacred ladder for the gods to descend and walk upon the earth. Beyond the Jianmu, there were other, wilder pathways. There was Mount Dengbao, standing in a desolate, lonely wasteland, the solitary path for powerful sorcerers seeking to commune with the spirits above. Or the mystical Lingshan Mountain in the southern sea, nestled between a river of black water and a river of blue water. That place was filled with rare and strange flora, but it was guarded by a terrifying crimson serpent, keeping ordinary souls at bay. In those primordial days, the sky ladders were a symbol of hope, an innocent thread connecting humanity and the divine. They were like the Tower of Babel in the West, a manifestation of our longing to touch paradise. But eventually, this freedom of movement caused chaos. To restore order, the ancient ruler Emperor Zhuanchu made the heavy decision to sever these pathways, separating the mortal realm from the celestial realm forever. Since then, the Jianmu tree and the sacred mountains remain only in the pages of old books and in the quiet landscapes of our dreams. Let us drift back to the earliest days of humanity. In those ancient times, whenever the night descended or the dawn broke, our ancestors would gaze up at the vast sky with infinite reverence. To them, those celestial bodies were the very source of light, the rhythm of life itself. And from that wonder, beautiful myths of the sun and moon were born, weaving a tapestry of dreams in the minds of the ancients. Traveling back through the river of time to the Shang dynasty some 3,000 years ago, in the mysterious realm of chaos, there lived a great god named Dijun. He ruled over a vast realm of heaven and earth and had 3 beautiful wives. Among them, Chang'e was the mother of the radiant suns, while Chang'e was the mother of the gentle moons. Imagine, if you will, a land lying beyond the vast eastern sea, where the sweet waters of the Gan River flow endlessly. This was the home of the sun goddess Chang'e and her 10 children, the 10 sons. She loved them with all a mother's heart. Every day she would use the water of the Gan River to bathe her children. Because her children carried the heat of sacred fire within them, their bodies were always glowing and warm. The moment they stepped into the river, the water would bubble and boil. Steam would rise in thick white clouds, creating a mystical, foggy valley. Thus, the ancients named this place Pangu, the Valley of Boiling Water. After washing away the dust of the world and shining brightly, the 10 sons would rest together on a colossal ancient mulberry tree by the riverbank. This divine tree, known as the Fusang, towered up to the 9 heavens. It was 300 miles wide, yet strangely, its leaves were as small and delicate as mustard seeds. This was the sanctuary where the sons took turns watching over the slumber of the world. Each morning, when the dew still clung to the leaves, one son would take up the duty of the day. He would climb onto the back of a 3-legged crow. The crow would spread its jet-black wings, carrying the sun high into the air. The journey would begin in the glowing east, drifting slowly across the vast sky, bringing light to all living things before quietly landing in the west as the purple twilight fell. At the end of the day, he would return to his mother Chang'e to bathe and sink into a deep, restorative sleep. As eons passed, the story evolved. By the time of the Han Dynasty, the ancient text Huinanzi tells us that goddess Chang'e would not just send a crow, but would drive a magnificent chariot pulled by 6 majestic dragons to carry the sun across the sky. This image reminds us of the god Apollo in distant Greek mythology, who also drove a fiery chariot across the heavens. Whether in the east or the west, the human imagination regarding the light has always been magical. Perhaps you have heard the dramatic legend of the hero Hou Yi, who drew his bow to shoot down 9 of the suns. But that is a story of conflict and fire, a story we shall save for another dream. For mythology is a collection of fragmented memories, sometimes contradictory, but always enchanting. Now let the sunlight fade and give way to the gentleness of the night. If Chang'e brought warmth, then the goddess Chang'e in the western plains brought coolness. She was the mother of the 12 moons. Just like her sister, she would kindly bathe her children so that every night a moon would rise, shining its silver light to watch over the peaceful sleep of the world. Let the image of the misty river, the silent ancient tree, and the silver moonlight guide you into a deep, soft sleep. We often imagine that the gods reside only in the soaring heights of the heavens, far beyond our reach. But the ancients believed that right here in the mortal realm there existed a resting place for the divine. This was the magnificent Mount Kunlun. If the west boasts of the proud Mount Olympus, then the east reveres the towering Kunlun, one of the 8 great pillars holding up the sky. Picture, if you will, a colossal mountain 800 miles wide and soaring 80,000 feet into the air, its peak brushing against the very stars. Legend tells us that the palace of the gods does not rest upon common earth, but floats majestically upon a giant 8-cornered rock suspended in the air with silent grace. It is a breathtaking city of 5 fortress walls and 12 glittering palaces. On each side of the mountain, 9 great gates stand open, strictly guarded by the Kaiming, the enlightened beast, solemn and imposing. Along the walls lie 9 divine wells, their railings carved from precious jade, glowing with a soft, cool light in the quiet of the night. Wander with me now along the peaks of Kunlun, and you will find yourself lost in a garden of paradise filled with wondrous flora. Look there, that is the mu, a tree of grain, tall and sturdy. Its trunk is so vast that it would take 5 people joining hands to embrace it. To the east grows the shadang and the langan. The fruit of the shadang looks like a ripe plum, but has no pit. It is said that anyone who tastes it will feel their body become light as a feather, able to float upon the sea, or dive deep without a care. Beside it stands the langan tree, bearing fruit that sparkles like pearls, and jade, a precious delicacy reserved for the phoenix birds. Protecting these treasures is the god Liju, with 3 eyes and 6 arms watching over the grove day and night, adding a sense of solemn majesty to the silence. Drifting toward the south, we find the crimson jiang tree, red as fire guarded by coiling dragons and divine serpents. And to the north stands the wenyu, the most beautiful tree of all, with gems of every color hanging from its branches, shimmering like fallen stars. On this holy mountain, nature provides miraculous gifts. Most mysterious is the shiru, a strange magical substance. It has no limbs or bones, soft and yielding like fresh earth. The wonder of the shiru is that it regenerates endlessly. Take a piece and another grows in its place, serving as an eternal source of nourishment for this immortal realm. Kunlun is also home to 2 landscapes of unrivaled beauty. First, the Jasper Lake, or Yaochi, where the Queen Mother of the West often strolls to gaze at the reflection of the clouds on the mirror-like water. Second is the Li Spring, a stream of sweet crystal-clear water babbling among exotic flowers, its sound like the gentle lullaby of the forest. Yet this splendor is a place mortals can only admire from afar. Ruling over Kunlun is the god Lu, a being with a human face, but the majestic body of a tiger, possessing 9 powerful tails. Flanking him are mystical creatures, the 4-horned goat, and the birds with poisonous feathers standing as a solid wall to protect the sanctity of the gods. To reach this fairyland, one would have to overcome impossible obstacles. At the foot of the mountain lies the weak water, a river so deep and strange that even a single feather dropped upon it would sink instantly. No boat can cross it. Surrounding the outside is the fiery mountain, where sacred flames burn eternally. Even stone thrown into it turns to ash. The ancient book Huainanzi tells us that the journey up Kunlun is a journey toward immortality. Whoever climbs to the peak of Liangfeng will gain eternal life. Climb higher to the hanging gardens, and one can command the wind and rain. And if one has the perseverance to ascend to the very top, touching the gates of heaven, they will transcend the mortal form and become a spirit free forevermore. In the spiritual mind of the ancient Chinese, the ocean was the keeper of the deepest mysteries, especially the vast Eastern Sea, a realm that welcomes thousands of great rivers flowing into its embrace day and night. Have you ever wondered why, even though water from 100 rivers pours endlessly into the sea, the ocean never overflows? The ancients whispered that at the far eastern edge of the world, there lies a colossal bottomless canyon known as the Gikshu, the Great Abyss. When the seawater flows there, it vanishes into the void, returning to an eternal silence. Thanks to this, the level of the sea remains unchanged for thousands of years, forever calm and steady. Amidst the misty haze of that eastern sea, the ancient book of Liezi records the legend of 5 floating mountains. Their names alone sound light and ethereal: Daiyu, Yuanjiao, Fanghu, Yingzhou, and Penglai. These mountains do not cluster together, but are separated by 70,000 miles. Each one towers 30,000 miles high, with flat, expansive peaks like vast plains resting upon the clouds. Imagine, if you will, a paradise where palaces are built entirely of solid gold, glowing with a soft, gentle light. This is the dwelling place of the immortals who never age. They possess delicate wings, allowing them to soar freely from one peak to another, to visit friends drifting carefree through the blue sky. The trees here bear fruit of pearls and jade, releasing a strange, sweet fragrance. Whoever tastes them shares the longevity of heaven and earth. The animals on these mountains are all clad in fur as white as snow, pure and untouched by the dust of the world. However, these 5 magnificent mountains had no roots to anchor them to the deep. They simply bobbed and drifted on the waves with the rhythm of the tides. Whenever a great wind rose, the mountains would drift aimlessly, causing great worry among the immortals. The Yellow Emperor, fearing these paradises might drift away and be lost, ordered Yuqiang, the god of the northern sea, to find a way to secure them. Yuqiang summoned 15 gigantic divine turtles to the eastern sea. Visualize these colossal, steady creatures swimming slowly to lift the 5 mountains upon their shells. 3 turtles were assigned to support each mountain, 1 to bear the weight from below, and 2 to guard the sides. Every 60,000 years they would change shifts. Thanks to the patient endurance of these divine turtles, the islands finally stood firm amidst the ocean. But eventually, this peace was disturbed. Giants from the distant land of Longba came to cast their fishing lines by the sea. They were so massive that with just a few casts, they hooked 6 of the divine turtles and carried them away. Without their steadfast pillars, the two mountains of Daiyu and Yuanjiao drifted toward the far frozen north and quietly sank into the deep. Since then, the human world has known only three remaining islands, Pangu Yingzhou and Penglai, where thousands of immortals still reside in peace. The emperor, furious at the destruction, shrank the people of Longba so they could never again harm the realm of the gods. The story of these floating islands has always been the longing of the mortal heart. We all dream of a life free and unfettered, escaping the worries of the day, soaring between white clouds and blue waves. Whether a commoner or a king, the dream of eternity and tranquility remains ever present in our deepest sleep. While the immortals on the peaks of Kunlun, or out in the eastern sea, enjoyed eternal freedom, drifting with the winds of heaven and earth, mortals were bound by the laws of nature to be born to grow and eventually to return to the dust. The ancient Chinese believed that when a person finally closed their eyes for the last time, their soul would begin a new journey toward a place called Yudu. Imagine a land deep within the shadows, a place where the sun's rays never touch. This is Yudu, the capital of gloom. Ruling over this solemn realm is the god Hou Yi, a loyal minister of the Yellow Emperor. In the imagination of the ancients, Hou Yi possessed a form that was both majestic and imposing, designed to command the spirits. He stood strong as a buffalo, with the fierce face of a tiger. Curved horns crowned his head, and most strikingly, he possessed three large, deep eyes that remained forever open, gazing through the eternal night. Under his strict rule, souls were judged for the deeds they had done while walking the earth. Because of the strictness and the deep darkness of Yudu folklore, tells us that many spirits fearful of entering those gates chose instead to drift. They would wander the borders of the world. And the sanctuary for these wandering souls was the mountain of Taodu, standing solitary in the vast eastern sea. Taodu is a place of unbelievable grandeur. Upon its peak grows a colossal peach tree. Its roots plunge deep into the heart of the earth, while its lush branches spread out to cover an area of 3,000 miles. Its canopy acts like a great protective roof, sheltering the spirits who seek refuge there. The most magical feature of Taodu sits atop the very highest branch, a golden rooster. Every morning at the precise moment, the first ray of sunlight touches the ocean's surface. The golden rooster raises its voice in a resounding crow, awakening the world. This sound is the signal that the night has ended. At this call, all the spirits wandering through the darkness must hurry back beneath the shade of the peach tree and gather before the ghost gate. Waiting there to inspect them are the two guardian gods, Shentu and Yulei. With eyes that see everything, these gods look deep into the heart of every spirit. If they discover any soul that caused harm to others in life, they bind them with ropes woven from reeds and deliver them to the divine tigers for punishment. Thanks to the vigilance of Shentu and Yulei, order is kept in the other world, ensuring that spirits do not disturb the peace of the living. This is why, to this day, during the Lunar New Year, people carve the images of these two gods onto peach wood and hang them on their doors, a silent prayer for safety and protection. The story of the afterlife is a mirror reflecting the ancient hopes and fears of humanity. Just as the West has Hades ruling the cold underworld, or Christianity has its final judgment, the East had Yudu and Taodu. Later, as Buddhism flowed into the land, the image of the 10 courts of hell began to replace these ancient legends. But the image of the great peach tree sheltering souls in the eastern sea remains a poetic memory of the past. Let your mind wander now to the misty far northwest, to a legendary land known as Huaxu. It was a utopia amidst the mortal world, a place of strange and perfect peace. In this land, there were no kings or rulers. Everything simply followed the gentle rhythm of nature, like drifting clouds and flowing water. The people of Huaxu lived without the burden of greed, knowing nothing of selfishness. They knew only how to love and protect one another. Life there was so blissful and long that the boundary between life and death faded into a soft haze. They lived freely unattached to the past and unafraid of the future. In this fairyland lived a maiden named Lady Huaxu. One day, she strolled to the Thunder Marsh Leze to play. The scenery was enchanting with lush flowers and crystal clear water. As she was lost in the beauty of the view, she suddenly saw a giant footprint imprinted on the ground. Overcome by curiosity, she stepped into it to measure it against her own foot. Unexpectedly, this was the footprint of the Thunder God, a deity with a human head and a dragon's body. From that magical union, she conceived and gave birth to a son named Fuxi. Fuxi was born with an extraordinary appearance, possessing a human head and a serpent's body, inheriting the raw power of the divine. In ancient stone reliefs from the Han Dynasty artists, often depicted Fuxi and the goddess Nüwa as a devoted couple. They appear with human heads and long serpentine tails that are intertwined like vines, symbolizing the perfect harmony of yin and yang. In his hand, Fuxi holds a compass representing the round sky. In hers, Nüwa holds a square rule representing the steady earth. Together, these tools form the concept of Guiju, the rules and order of the universe. Because of this, Fuxi is revered as the god of marriage. He created the zither and the harp so that their gentle, melodious strings could sing the praises of wedded bliss. As time drifted on, the myths took on new colors. By the Tang Dynasty, a touching story was recorded in the book Du Yi Ji. In that version, beneath the vast sky, only two people remained, the brother and sister, Fuxi and Nüwa. Facing the extinction of humanity, they worried deeply about uniting, fearing it might go against the order of nature. To find an answer, they climbed together to the peak of the mystical Mount Kunlun to ask the will of the heavens. On the windy summit, each lit a bonfire at a distance from the other. They clasped their hands and prayed, "If the blue sky permits us to be husband and wife, let the smoke from these two fires weave together as one. If not, let the smoke drift apart and vanish." No sooner had the prayer ended than two trails of white smoke rose slowly. Carried by the wind, they drifted toward each other, intertwining and blending until they could no longer be separated. The will of heaven was clear. Putting aside their hesitation, they accepted the mission to continue the human line. Shyly, Nüwa wove wild grass into a fan to hide her blushing face on the day of their union. This became the origin of the ancient custom, where brides would hold a fan to cover their faces, a gesture of grace and modesty. There is also another version whispered in folklore connected to the Great Flood. The story goes that while Fuxi was fishing, a giant white turtle swam up to him and spoke in a dreamlike voice. "In 100 days, the heavens and earth will collapse and water will rise to drown the sky. I have come to save you. Feed me one fish every day." The siblings listened and cared for the divine turtle. Exactly 100 days later, the fury of nature descended. A vast flood submerged all things. The white turtle opened its mouth and swallowed the brother and sister, diving deep into the safety of the waters. Inside the turtle's belly was a magnificent palace, and the fish they had stored became their food. When the waters finally receded, the world was silent. Only the two of them remained. They climbed a high mountain, and each rolled a heavy stone millstone down the slope, praying. If these two millstones roll to the bottom and find each other stacking perfectly together, then we shall become husband and wife. And miraculously, the lifeless stones rolled down, bumped into one another, and came to rest, perfectly stacked, forming a complete mill. From that day on, Hou Yi and Nüwa followed the will of the spirits. They became husband and wife, rebirthing humanity and opening a new era of life upon the earth. Here is the translation for Part 9, carefully designed, with a soothing cadence and evocative imagery to guide the listener toward a peaceful sleep. In those ancient days, when humanity was just taking its first toddling steps between the vast heavens and the earth, life was filled with countless hardships. But Hou Yi, the son of the thunder god, carried not only divine blood, but also a brilliant wisdom. He would often sit quietly, observing the natural world, learning its silent lessons. Picture, if you will, a quiet morning when the dew still glistens on the leaves. Hou Yi watched a spider diligently spinning its silk. The fragile threads were being woven into an intricate web to catch its prey. A thought suddenly bloomed in his mind. Why must humans struggle to catch fish with their bare hands in the cold water? Inspired, he took cords and ropes, mimicking the spider, to weave them into large, sturdy nets. From that day on, nets filled with silver fish brought warmth and fullness to the people. But the greatest invention, the one that chased away the darkness and the biting cold of the long night, was fire. Legend says that Hou Yi tried rubbing wood together, his patience eventually birthing the first sparks. However, within the pages of ancient texts like the Shi Yi Ji Dusty with time, there is another story more mystical and serene about the origin of fire. It is linked to a wise sage named Suiren Shi. Let your mind drift to a distant land in the Wild West, known as the country of swimming. It was a strange place, a realm where the light of the sun and the moon could not reach. The people there lived in an eternal twilight, knowing no difference between day and night. In that land stood a colossal ancient tree named the Suimu. Its branches stretched so far that they covered 10,000 acres like a giant umbrella sheltering the world. In the quiet canopy of that tree lived a species of great birds. Whenever they used their strong beaks to peck at the tree trunk, looking for food, dazzling sparks would fly out glittering like falling stars. A wise sage wandering through this land saw these dancing sparks and had an awakening. He understood the principle that friction creates heat. He returned to the Central Plains and taught the people how to drill into wood to kindle a flame. To honor his gift of light and warmth, the people reverently named him Suiren Shi, the fire maker. In the distant myths of the West, we hear of Prometheus, who bravely stole sacred fire from Mount Olympus and suffered the pain of the eagle each day. But in the East, the story of fire is one of peace and wisdom. There was no punishment, no conflict with the gods. The fire of Hou Yi, or Suiren Shi, was the result of quiet observation, a gift of wisdom that humanity found for itself. It was a gentle, benevolent fire. Hou Yi did not stop at fishing nets and fire. He left behind a mystical legacy that unlocks the secrets of the cosmos, the Bagua, or the 8 trigrams. Imagine standing by the rolling waters of the Yellow River, the most sacred river of the ancients. One day, rising from the misty waves, 4 dragon horses creatures with the head of a dragon and the body of a horse slowly emerged. On their backs, they carried strange, intricate patterns. Fuxi, with his keen eyes, studied these markings, contemplating the laws of heaven and earth. From this he drew the 8 trigrams of the Bagua Qian is the high heaven, Kun is the deep earth, Kan is the flowing water, Li is the dancing fire, Zhen is the rolling thunder, Xun is the soft wind, Jian is the high mountain, and Dui is the calm lake. These 8 simple symbols encapsulated the vast universe, helping humans predict the shifting tides of the future, to avoid misfortune and find peace without needing to beg for oracles from distant temples. After completing his mission of enlightenment, Fuxi returned to the eternal realm. The book Huainanzi records that he became the celestial emperor of the East, also known as the Azure Emperor. Together with the tree god Gumang, he rules over a vast expanse of 12,000 miles, stretching from the Jishi mountain to the very place where the sun rises. He became the god of spring. And so, whenever you see green buds sprouting on the branches, or feel a warm breeze blowing after the cold winter, know that it is the gentle breath of Fuxi comforting the world. His color is green, the color of life and of peaceful beginnings. The story begins in the mists of antiquity. There was a king named Xiaodian who had a beloved consort named Nu Deng. One day, while wandering through the wild, she felt a spiritual resonance with a divine dragon and conceived a child. The baby was born with a majestic and unusual form, the head of a bull and the body of a man. This was the Yan Emperor. On the day he entered the world, a miracle occurred. 9 wells suddenly sprang up from the dry earth, their water crystal clear. These 9 wells were connected by mysterious underground veins. It is said that if you drew water from one well, the surface of the other 8 would ripple and dance, as if rejoicing to welcome the new king. In those early days, human life was filled with hardship. People survived only by gathering wild fruits and hunting for snails and crabs, leaving them weak and often plagued by sickness. Seeing this suffering, the Yan Emperor's heart was filled with a deep, unwavering sorrow. His compassion was so great that it moved the blue sky above, causing the heavens to release a rain of grain. Golden seeds fell from the clouds like precious pearls. The Yan Emperor cherished these gifts, gathering every seed to plant in the fertile soil. But the wild earth was hard, and the weeds were stubborn. Working tirelessly day and night, he used fire to forge iron, creating the very first axe plow and hoe. He taught the people how to clear the wildlands, how to sow seeds, and how to care for the harvest. Under his hand, the rice fields grew heavy with grain, and lush green cornfields stretched endlessly toward the horizon. He possessed great magical power. If he wished for rain, the rain would fall. If he wished for sun, the sun would shine. Thanks to him, the winds were gentle and the rains favorable. The harvests were bountiful, and humanity no longer had to endure the pain of hunger. In gratitude, the people honored him as Shennong, the divine farmer. But he cared for more than just their hunger. He cared for their health. To find cures for their ailments, he personally tasted hundreds of thousands of herbs. Legend tells us that his body was as transparent as crystal. When he swallowed an herb, one could clearly see how its medicinal properties reacted within his stomach. There were days when he tasted poisonous plants and suffered the pain of 70 poisons, but thanks to his divine aura, he survived them all. Later, he found a magical red whip known as the Jian Xian. By simply touching a plant with this whip, he could instantly know its nature, distinguishing the precious cures from the deadly poisons. Thanks to his sacrifice, the foundations of medicine were born, saving countless lives. Under the reign of the Yan Emperor, the world was a symphony of peace. Men diligently plowed the fields, women skillfully wove cloth. There was no theft, and there was no war. His descendants were also great figures. His great-great-grandson was none other than Zhurong, the god of fire, who rode upon dragons and brought warm light to the world. The Yan Emperor was a father of deep emotion, yet his life carried melancholy notes regarding his daughters. He had a daughter named Hou Yi, beautiful as a flower, but destined for a short life. She passed away while still young and transformed into the Yao grass on Mount Guyao, its leaves growing in lush layers, its flowers blooming yellow like the sun. Grieving for his child, the Yan Emperor named her the goddess of Wu Mountain. Her spirit transformed into multicolored clouds, drifting freely among the misty peaks. Every twilight, she would turn into a gentle, drizzling rain, whispering her secrets to the silent rivers and lakes. His youngest daughter was named Nüwa, sharing the name of the great creator goddess. While playing by the eastern sea, she was tragically swept away by the fierce waves. Her spirit transformed into a beautiful bird called the Chang'e, with a patterned head, a white beak, and red feet. Driven by an endless sorrow against the ocean, the Chang'e bird flies daily from the western mountains, carrying small stones and twigs in her beak to drop into the eastern sea. The little bird flies on, driven by a timeless wish to fill the vast, deep ocean. The wheel of history continued to turn. At the end of the Yan Emperor's era, conflicts arose and the social order began to fade. After the rise of the warlord Hou Yi, the Yan Emperor joined forces with the Yellow Emperor to unite the great tribes, creating the Yan-Huang Alliance, becoming the common ancestors of the people. Having completed his mission in the mortal world, the Yan Emperor ascended to become the Celestial Emperor of the South. Together with his grandson Zhurong, he governs the glorious summer and the warm southern lands. His kingdom stretches for 10,000 miles, filled with the vibrant red of life and passion. Hello, my friend. The night has gently fallen, and all things are sinking into a deep slumber. Let the worries of the long day fade away, leaving only relaxation and peace. Today, we shall continue our journey back against the flow of time, to the lands of legend, where the gods watch over the corners of the sky. In our last story, we witnessed the power of the Yellow Emperor at the center of the universe. But tonight, let your mind fly to the distant and mysterious west to listen to the story of Xiao Hao, the god of autumn and the ruler of the kingdom of birds. The story begins with beautiful dreams during the reign of the Yellow Emperor. Legend tells us that on a quiet, empty night, a magnificent star streaked across the sky. It trailed a long, glittering tail like a rainbow gliding through the heavens before gently descending upon the Huazhu Islands. That night, a woman named Nu Ji dreamed that a star came to rest beside her. When she awoke, she had conceived a child. She gave birth to a son and named him Xiao Hao. On the day he entered the world, the phoenix birds flew in from the unknown, dancing in the air to bring him blessings. But there is another tale even more romantic and poetic about the origin of this god. The ancients whisper that Xiao Hao was the crystallization of love between a star and a fairy. Let your imagination float to the vast western sea where the waves roll endlessly. There lived a fairy named Chang'e. By night she wove cloth upon the moon. By day she drifted on a wooden raft, wandering through the mountains and waters. One day, she drifted into a fairyland called Chang'e. In this place stood a colossal ancient mulberry tree soaring 8,000 feet high. Its leaves were as red as fire, and its fruit was a deep, sweet purple. This divine tree bore fruit only once every 10,000 years, and whoever tasted it would gain eternal life. The beauty of Chang'e captivated the fairy, and then the Venus star, the gold star high in the heavens, fell in love with her. He transformed into a handsome young man holding a zither made of firm wutung wood. He played melodies that were clear and melodious, blending perfectly with the sound of the ocean waves. Their music and their songs intertwined, weaving a beautiful love story between heaven and earth. From that love, Hou was born. As he grew, Hou became a wise king, choosing Chang'e as his capital. Later, he became the god ruling over Mount Chang'e in the west. Visualize the majestic Mount Chang'e, where the animals all wear coats of colorful fur, and the birds bear exquisite patterns upon their heads. This mountain births precious jade stones with glittering veins. Hou's palace rests on the high peak, where every day he borrows the brilliant light of the setting sun to reflect back toward the east, creating a scene of absolute magnificence. But the most magical thing about Hou was the kingdom he established beside the Guikshu abyss beyond the eastern sea. It was a land of wings, a kingdom governed entirely by birds. To honor the phoenix that danced at his birth, Hou entrusted this noble bird with the calendar to calculate the days and months. The swallows, the finches, and the pheasants took turns watching over the 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The brave vulture held military power. The dignified eagle administered the law, and the gentle dove oversaw education. The entire kingdom was alive with the sound of singing and the soft beating of wings. Other birds worked with passion, some building nests, others forging tools, making pottery, or dyeing cloth. It was a peaceful world where humans and birds lived in harmony under the protection of a virtuous king. Hou was also the first teacher of Zhuanshu, who would later become the celestial emperor of the north. He gifted his nephew a zither and a harp to nurture his soul. But Zhuanshu, possessing a quiet nature, preferred listening to the music of the wild rather than playing instruments himself. And so he released the instruments into a deep canyon, letting their strings hum along with the mountain winds. Hou had many children, each unique. A gentle son named Chang'e later became Gumang, the god of trees who brings spring to the world. Another son named Shu became the god of metal, assisting his father in ruling the autumn. There was, however, a rebellious son named Chang'e, a winged beast with a fierce temper. Fearing his father's strictness, Chang'e fled to the far north. But let us not dwell on him. That is a story for the wild wastelands. In Hou's kingdom, peace always reigned supreme. After completing his mission in the mortal world, Hou became the celestial emperor of the West, also known as the White Emperor. Together with his son Shu, he governs the cool, crisp autumn and the vast western sky. His realm stretches for 12,000 miles from the western edge of the earth, passing through the mystical Mount Kunlun. Our story begins in the final years of the White Emperor Hou's reign. In those days, a mysterious omen suddenly appeared in the night sky. The Alkaid star, one of the 7 brilliant stars of the Big Dipper, unexpectedly left its position, trailing a long, glittering light, like a rainbow as it pierced through the silver moon. At that very moment, in the quiet solitude of the palace, Lady Jingpu, the wife of Chang'e, was deep in slumber. The mystical light of the star touched her dream. and from that celestial connection she conceived. Later, her husband Chang'e was exiled to the banks of the Weak Water River in the far, desolate southwest, a place where the water was so gentle it could not even support the weight of a single floating leaf. Lady Jingpu followed her husband to this wild land, and there gave birth to a son, naming him Zhuanshu. On the day Zhuanshu entered the world, a majestic sign appeared. The infant was born with a shield and spear already upon his head. It was the mark of a king, destined for the battlefield, a ruler who would forge great legends. Zhuanshu grew as fast as the wind, possessing a wisdom far beyond ordinary men. By 10 years old, he was already assisting his uncle Xiao Hao. By 12, he carried himself with the dignity of a grown man. And at the age of 20, this young man ascended the throne, establishing his capital at Diqiu. To keep the world in peace, Zhuanshu would often ride a divine dragon to patrol the four corners of the earth. Imagine the image of the majestic young king riding upon the dragon's back, gliding silently through the layers of clouds, traveling to every place where the sunlight could reach. When he returned to the palace, he would recall the sounds of the winds from the distant lands he had visited. He would then command the flying dragon to mimic those sounds, composing the melodious rising and falling music, known as riding the clouds, to offer to the Yellow Emperor. Trusted by the Yellow Emperor to govern the universe, the first thing Zhuanshu did was to make a monumental decision to sever the path between heaven and earth. In those ancient times, though the sky and earth had separated, there were still cloud ladders and pillars connecting the two realms. Gods, sorcerers, and even chaotic spirits frequently traveled back and forth, often disturbing the order of the mortal world. To end this confusion, Zhuanshu summoned his two most trusted deities, Chang'e and Li. In a space of absolute silence and solemnity, Zhuanshu gave his command. The god Chang'e used his mighty hands to push the sky up higher and higher. The god Li used all his strength to press the earth down deeper and deeper. The distance between the heavens and the earth stretched and stretched, farther and farther apart, until the sky ladders snapped and could no longer touch. From that moment, the celestial court and the human world became two separate realms, restoring a deep, quiet peace to both. His mission complete, Chang'e remained above to govern the vast sky, while Li stayed below to guard the boundless earth. Having established this new order, Zhuanshu's power became unrivaled. In his desire to control the very rhythm of the universe, he did something unprecedented. He ordered the sun, the moon, and the stars of the northern sky to be fixed in place, forbidding them to move freely any longer. Visualize a sky frozen in time. The flow of hours seemed to stop. There were lands bathed in eternal blinding light where the sun stood forever overhead. And there were places submerged in a thick, heavy darkness shrouded in mist, where one could not even see their own hand in front of their face. An absolute stillness, profound, heavy, and silent, settled over all things under the strict, unmoving reign of Zhuanshu. Do you recall the absolute silence that Zhuanshu imposed upon the universe in our last story? It was this very suppression that caused the free currents of the world to stir and rise. And the one who stood up to break that silence was Gonggong. Gonggong was the son of Zhurong, the fire god, carrying the fiery blood of his ancestor, the Yan Emperor. Yet strangely, he was the god who ruled over the water-dwelling in the cold, wild lands of the north. Imagine a deity of wild and mysterious beauty. His head and limbs were human, but his body moved with the lithe grace of a divine serpent. He possessed the raw strength of nature, nourishing his spirit with the grains of the earth and the beasts of the forest. By his side were two trusted lieutenants, equally mystical in appearance. First was Zhang Liu, a being with 9 heads, his body covered in the gloomy green of the ancient forest. His 9 heads were strangely flexible. They never fed from the same place, but would stretch to 9 different mountains. Wherever Zhang Liu slithered, the land would turn into vast, endless marshes. And then there was Hou Yi, a mysterious deity who, upon transforming, became a great bear of blazing red. Together, they assisted Gong Gong, watching over every vein of water and stream under the heavens. Eventually, the conflict between the rigid order of Zhuanshu and the free-flowing nature of the water led to an inevitable confrontation. Zhuanshu, the mighty celestial emperor, led the sea god Yu Qiang to meet them in battle. Visualize this battle not as the clashing of sharp swords, but as the collision of immense energies between heaven and earth. One side was wind and command. The other was surging waves and rebellion. Gradually, the battlefield shifted to the northwest, where a towering mountain stood its peak, piercing through the 9 layers of clouds. This was one of the 8 steady pillars holding up the sky since the dawn of time. When he realized that his strength alone could not shake Zhuanshu's order, in a moment of supreme fury and tragedy, Gong Gong decided to gamble his very self against creation. He hurled his body against that colossal mountain. A sound vibrated through the heart of heaven and earth. The pillar of heaven, no matter how massive, could not withstand a collision carrying the weight of an entire ocean. The mountain's spine snapped and its peak crumbled. From then on, the mountain bore a name filled with nostalgia, Mount Buzhou, meaning the mountain of imperfection. But this collapse opened a new chapter for the universe, one more beautiful and natural than before. The ancient book Huainanzi records that when Mount Buzhou fell, the sky lost its support in the northwest and slowly tilted toward that direction. The sun, the moon, and the stars, which had been imprisoned in the north by Zhuanshu, rode the tilt of the sky and escaped. They joyfully returned to their natural paths, drifting gently from east to west, bringing the rhythmic cycle of day and night back to the human world. At the same time, the invisible cord holding the earth snapped. The land in the southeast slowly sank lower. Since water always seeks the lowest ground from that moment on, 100,000 rivers of the mortal world began to flow peacefully toward the southeast, creating the gentle currents that pour into the great sea. Zhuanshu's harsh order was broken, yielding to a new natural law. The rhythmic operation of the universe, as we know it today, began in that very moment. As for Gong Gong, after striking the mountain, he did not vanish. Instead, he quietly dove deep into the silent pools, hiding himself within the embrace of the vast ocean. His followers too dispersed, blending into the rivers and lakes, continuing their lives of freedom, forever flowing with the water. Following the great battle that fractured the pillar of heaven, the order of the cosmos was changed forever. And just as the seasons must turn, so too did the journey of Zhuanshu in the mortal realm come to its inevitable twilight. Though he had been a strict and absolute ruler in the flowing river of mythology, he remains a majestic emperor revered by the ages. Regarding his final resting place, the ancients whisper tales wrapped in the mists of time. Some say that Zhuanshu's tomb lies in solitude on the southern slopes of Mount Hou Yi in the far north. On the northern slopes of that same mountain lie the tombs of his 9 consorts. Surrounding this sacred ground are deep ancient forests, where wild beasts pace silently day and night, guarding the eternal slumber of their king. Others whisper that he rests in the lands of Nei Huang, or perhaps Liu Cheng. But no matter where his body lies, his sleep has long since merged with the mountains and the rivers. After leaving his mortal form, Zhuanshu's spirit ascended to the north, becoming the Dark Emperor, the celestial deity ruling over the cold, vast north. Assisting him is the majestic sea god Xuanming. Zhuanshu holds the power of winter, governing a boundless realm stretching 10,000 miles from the 9 marshes to the frozen edges of the world. His symbol is the color black. But do not mistake this for the black of fear. It is the velvet black of the quiet night, the black of the deep ocean, and the black of eternal rest. When winter arrives and the world sinks into slumber, when leaves fall and snow blankets the earth in white, it is Zhuanshu who reigns. He brings the necessary silence so that the earth may gather its strength for the coming spring. The lineage of Zhuanshu was vast and mysterious. He had brilliant children like Lao Tong, who became a celestial spirit, or Qiong Chan, who became the kitchen god warming the hearth of every family. However, divine blood sometimes births mysteries. Legend tells that he had 3 daughters who possessed strange forms and spirits. One lived hidden in the currents of the Yangtze River. Another drifted to the weak waters of the Ruo River, becoming a mischievous spirit. And the third hid in the dark corners of mortal homes, often startling children who cried in the night. These 3 remind us of the Keres sisters in Greek mythology, spirits of shadow and fate. Zhuanshu also had a son with a spirit so eccentric it was almost tragic. This son despised silk and fine clothes, preferring only rags. He rejected fine feasts, preferring only scraps. On a freezing winter night, this frail son quietly passed away in a small alley, transforming into the spirit of poverty. It is a melancholy note in the grand epic of the Northern Gods family. Yet beyond these sorrowful tales, Zhuanshu's other descendants spread far and wide. They traveled to distant corners of the earth, clearing land and establishing prosperous nations like the Kingdom of Shusi and the Kingdom of Qiyu, continuing the glorious bloodline of their ancestor. In the vast world of Chinese mythology, stories sometimes flow like branching rivers, at times separating, at times merging, creating a picture that is hazy, yet endlessly enchanting. And the central figure of our story tonight is Emperor Ku, the great-grandson of the Yellow Emperor. Legend tells us that Emperor Ku was an extraordinary child. The very moment he entered the world, he spoke in a voice as clear as a bell, calling himself Jun. Growing up with a brilliant and enlightened mind, by the age of 15, he was already assisting his uncle Zhuanshu in governing the realm. He established great merits and eventually inherited the throne, becoming a wise and just ruler of the world under heaven. But what makes later generations remember Emperor Ku is not just his talent for ruling, but the mystical connections he shared with his 5 beautiful wives. Each wife brought to the mortal world a legend of her own. His first wife was Lady Zutu. She was a daughter of the Zutu lands, a place where the kindest souls gathered after the ancient wars. Lady Zutu was no ordinary mortal. She possessed magic and would often ride the clouds to wander over the mountains and waters. She fell in love with the beauty of the quiet Yuan and Luo rivers. It was in that picturesque landscape that Emperor Ku met her, loved her, and brought her home. Strangely, after they were married, every night she would dream a radiant dream. She saw herself swallowing the sun into her womb. Each time this dream returned, she gave birth to a son. 8 dreams brought forth 8 sons. These 8 young men all carried the extraordinary power of the sunlight scattering across the land to govern agriculture, bringing bountiful harvests to the human world. The story begins within the royal household of Emperor Ku. Apart from the brilliant sons we have already met, the emperor had 2 other sons named Abo and Shichen. Abo was the elder and Shichen the younger. Though they shared the same blood, their temperaments were as different as water and fire, as conflicting as day and night. From the time they were small, they could not find harmony. Their disagreements grew with the passing years, turning from petty arguments into fierce conflicts, until there were times when weapons were drawn. Seeing his sons in such discord, Emperor Ku's heart was heavy with sorrow. He understood that to preserve peace, there was no other way but to separate them forever. And so, he made a decision that would shape the stars. Ebo was sent to the land of Chang'e in the distant east to watch over the Shang star, the heart star. The younger brother Shichen was sent to the wild lands of Daxia in the west to watch over the Shen star, the Orion star. From that day on, a sad but beautiful law appeared in the heavens. When the Shang star rises in the east, the Shen star hurriedly sets in the west. And conversely, when the Shen star shines brilliantly, the Shang star vanishes behind the horizon. The 2 brothers, like these 2 stars, are destined to chase each other across the vast universe for eternity, yet never again shall they meet. However, this separation brought peace to the mortal world. In the land of Chang'e, Ebo's old anger gradually faded. He poured all his heart into his mission. Living among the poor people of the land, he saw that they endured a life of cold darkness. Whenever they hunted a beast, they had to eat the meat raw, swallowing blood and fur, for they had no fire. A deep compassion awoke within him. Ebo decided to do something bold. He would ascend to the celestial court and steal fire for humanity. On his first attempt, he stole a divine flame. But the heavenly fire burned too fiercely, its light exploding so brightly that he could not hide it, and he was forced to return in failure. That night, he tossed and turned, gazing up at the starry sky to form a plan. Finally, an idea came to him. The next time he ascended, he brought with him a rope tightly woven from dry grass. He lit the end of the rope, then quickly blew out the open flame, keeping only the glowing, smoldering ember burning deep inside. He hid the slowly burning rope deep within the folds of his robes and quietly, smoothly carried it down to the mortal world. From that tiny, smoldering ember, warm fires sprang up in hearths all across the land. Humanity finally had light to banish the shadows and heat to cook their food. Life became infinitely warmer and more civilized. But the secrets of the gods cannot be kept forever. Ebo's theft was discovered. To punish him and extinguish the stolen fire, the gods sent down a terrifying great flood. Dark clouds gathered and rain poured down like waterfalls. River waters rose in fury, drowning fields and villages in a sea of white foam. In the midst of the disaster, Ebo urged the people to run to the high ground. But as for himself, he made a choice. He climbed to the top of the Shang Star Observatory, the highest point in the land. There, amidst the howling wind and rain, he used his own body to shield the final precious ember. When the wrath of the heavens finally passed, the floodwaters slowly receded. The survivors returned to the observatory. Miraculously, the precious fire was still there, crackling warmly. But Ebo, their benefactor, had been exhausted by the cold and the storm. The waters had swept his spirit away into the eternal realm. To remember his gratitude, which was as vast as the sky and sea, the people renamed the observatory the Ibo altar, offering incense to him for thousands of years. The story of Ibo reminds us of Prometheus in Greek mythology, who also stole sacred fire out of love for humanity. But here in the East, the tale carries a color of tragic, silent sacrifice amidst the rising waters. Now lift your gaze to the sky in your mind's eye. Perhaps in the distant east and the far west, the stars of Chang'e and Shen are still quietly shining, guarding the peaceful sleep of the world. The second wife was Lady Jiandi, a daughter of the Yusong clan. Her story began on a breezy afternoon while she and her sister were dining on a high terrace. Suddenly, a jet-black swallow flew down from the sky, circling and singing melodiously. Delighted, the sisters used a jade basket to catch it. When the bird was safe inside, Jiandi reached in to hold it, but in a flash, the swallow flew away into the blue sky, leaving behind 2 tiny eggs. Overcome by curiosity, Jiandi tasted one. Unexpectedly, that egg carried the essence of heaven and earth, causing her to conceive. She gave birth to a son named Xi, who would later become the ancestor of the mighty Shang dynasty. The story of the third wife, Lady Jiang Yuan, is perhaps the most miraculous of all. While wandering through the wild, untouched nature, she saw a giant footprint imprinted on the ground. Curious, she placed her own foot into it and found that her foot was tiny, no bigger than the giant's big toe. Upon returning home, she found herself with child. But when the time came, she did not give birth to a normal baby, but to a strange round ball of flesh. Fearing this was a bad omen, she quietly took the bundle and left it in a deserted alley. But strangely, the oxen and sheep passing by walked gently around it, refusing to step on it. She then took it to the deep forest, but woodcutters appeared just in time. With no other choice, she placed the bundle upon the cold ice of a frozen pond. At that very moment, a great bird swooped down from the sky. It used its warm wings to cover and cradle the bundle, then flew away. From the ice, the cry of a child rang out. Jiang Yuan ran to look and saw the flesh ball had torn open, revealing a handsome baby boy holding a bow and arrow, pointing straight at the sky. Half afraid, half overjoyed, she took him home and named him Qi, the abandoned one. This boy grew up to become Hou Yi, the god who taught people to sow grain, the ancestor of the Zhou dynasty. The fourth wife was Lady Qingdu, a flower that bloomed late. At 20 years old, she was still unmarried and often wandered alone in the Chang'e region. One day, a strange wind rose up, bringing with it a majestic divine dragon. The dragon coiled around her, and through that spiritual connection she conceived. In truth, that dragon was an avatar of Emperor Hou himself. The son she bore would become one of the greatest kings in history, Emperor Yao. And finally, there was Lady Chang'e, who gave birth to a son named Diji. 5 wives, dreams of swallowing the sun, a swallow gifting an egg, and the footprint of a giant. All of these weave together a shimmering legendary tapestry about the origins of the ancient peoples. Our story begins beside a poetic river where Lady Qingdu, the mother of the future emperor, was taking a gentle stroll. A divine dragon, an avatar of Emperor Hou, appeared from the mist and sowed the seeds of life. 14 months later, a special child was born. His name was Fang Shun, but history would revere him as the great Emperor Yao. Emperor Yao was not born with the polished beauty of jade. Instead, he bore the rugged look of one destined to carry the weight of the mountains and rivers. The most mystical thing about him was his eyes. In each eye, there were 2 pupils nestled together. It was said that this double gaze allowed him to pierce through the dust of the world, seeing clearly into the deepest hidden sorrows of his people. After Emperor Ku passed the throne, first went to the elder brother DG. But after 9 years, the mantle of leadership was passed to Yao. And from that moment, a chapter of history, as beautiful as a dream, began to unfold. Picture, if you will, the palace of a supreme emperor. Are you imagining glittering gold, shimmering pearls, and carved jade? But no. The palace of Emperor Yao was startling in its simplicity. The pillars were made of rough, unpolished wood, stripped of bark, but never smoothed or painted. The roof was not tiled with glazed ceramic, but thatched with simple dry grass, just like the cottages of the common folk. Even the steps leading up to the throne were merely packed earth humble and grounded. Emperor Yao lived a life of ascetic simplicity so that he might truly understand the hearts of his people. His meals consisted of plain rice and soup made from wild greens. Through the 4 seasons, he wore clothes of rough hemp. Only when the biting cold of winter arrived did he drape an old animal skin over his shoulders for warmth. Everything around him was simple, untouched by luxury. Why would a king live this way? Because his heart beat in rhythm with the hearts of the 100 surnames. He often blamed himself, saying, "If there is a single person in the world who is hungry, it is my fault. If there is one person who is cold, it is because I have not done enough. If anyone commits a crime, it is because I have not taught them well." Because he worried so deeply for his people, he had no time to care for his own appearance. His hair grew long, flowing down 7 feet to touch the earth. His body was thin from tireless work. Yet it was this very form that radiated a halo of benevolence, inspiring infinite love and respect from all who saw him. The virtue of Emperor Yao moved not only the human heart, but also the heavens and the earth. In the courtyard of that humble palace, miracles began to bloom. The grass meant for horses suddenly turned into rice plants heavy with grain. The noble phoenix descended from the high clouds, landing in the courtyard to signal an era of peace. Most magical of all was a strange plant that grew by the earthen steps known as the calendar grass. This plant was like a clock of nature. On the first day of the lunar month, it would grow a single pod. On the second day, another would appear. This continued rhythmically until the full moon. Then on the 16th day, one pod would quietly fall off, each day, until the month ended, and the plant was bare once more. The people in the palace needed only to look at the breathing of this grass to know the passing of time moving in perfect harmony with the universe. There was also the flattery grass. This plant possessed a special intuition. If a person with a dishonest heart approached the grass would bend and point directly at them. Thanks to this, Emperor Yao could always discern the true nature of men choosing wise ministers to help the land flourish. Under his reign, the country was strong and wealthy. Every family lived in peace and joy. Theft vanished, and hunger was a forgotten memory. Later generations, whenever they spoke of perfect peace, would look back to the time of Yao as the standard a dream to aspire to. Even the great sage Confucius, in his Analects, could not help but utter the highest praise. Great indeed was Yao as a sovereign. Only heaven is great, and only Yao corresponded to it. His virtue was as vast as the ocean. The praise of the people could never be enough. Let your imagination drift back to a primordial time when the world was still steeped in the hot breath of the universe. In those days, there was not just one, but 10 suns in the sky. They were the children of the celestial emperor, residing in the branches of the colossal Fusang tree in the east. By ancient law, each day only one sun would climb onto the back of a golden three-legged crow to journey from east to west, bestowing a gentle light upon the world. But one day, that order was suddenly broken. Perhaps out of a playful whim, all 10 suns decided to rise together into the vast sky. The light was 10 times more blinding than usual, and a terrifying heat crashed down upon the mortal realm. Visualize the earth cracking open, lush green rice fields instantly withered into dust. Rivers ran dry, revealing their parched beds, and even the hardest stones began to melt. Humanity was plunged into a great drought, and life became as fragile as a candle flame in the wind. Worse still, this scorching heat awakened ancient demons and monsters, driving them from their lairs to ravage the already suffering lives of the people. Witnessing this heartbreaking scene, the celestial emperor could not stand idly by. He summoned Hou Yi, a god with arms of steel and the skill of an infallible archer. The emperor bestowed upon him a bow as red as vermilion blood and a quiver of arrows as white as cold snow. He entrusted Hou Yi with a mission: descend to the earth, punish the rebellious suns, and save all living things. Hou Yi, carrying his divine weapons, stepped down into the mortal world. Standing amidst the heat that burned like a furnace, he calmly raised his red bow, drew a white arrow, and aimed straight at the dancing balls of fire above. Swish! An arrow tore through the wind. A three-legged crow was struck. Its fire extinguished, it fell silently into the eastern sea. The world felt a little less hot. Hou Yi continued to draw his bow. Arrow after arrow flew swift, decisive, and precise. 8 more suns fell one by one, turning into scattered sparks and drifting feathers before vanishing into the void. Finally, only a single sun remained in the sky. Witnessing his brother's fall, the last sun trembled in fear. He obediently returned to his proper path, promising to shine with moderation forevermore. The sky slowly returned to a soothing cool blue. Gentle winds began to blow, healing the wounds of the scorched earth. But Hou Yi's mission did not end there. He continued his solitary journey across the world to rid the people of monsters. He traveled south to the mist-covered swamps filled with poisonous vapors. There he faced Zuoqi, a beast shaped like a man, but possessing a long, chisel-like tooth. After a fierce battle, Hou Yi's divine arrow laid the beast to rest east of the Kunlun Mountains. He turned north to the banks of the turbulent Hong River. There reigned the 9-headed serpent, Zhu Ying. Its 9 mouths spewed both fire and venomous water. But with his extraordinary skill, Hou Yi forced the monster to yield returning peace to the flowing waters. Then he went to the marshlands of the west, where the great wind bird Dafeng was flapping its massive wings, creating storms that destroyed homes. Knowing an arrow alone might not be enough, Hou Yi cleverly tied a sturdy rope to the end of his shaft. Waiting for the bird's shadow to blot out the sky, he struck its chest and pulled the beast down to the earth. He journeyed to Lake Dongting to slay a giant serpent, and to the weak water in the west to defeat the beast Yayu. Finally, in the dense mulberry forests of the Central Plains, he captured the giant boar that was trampling the harvest. He offered these victories to the Celestial Emperor, hoping for a reward. But in a twist of fate, the Emperor was not pleased. Grieving for his 9 dead sons, he stripped Hou Yi of his divine status. The hero who saved the world was cast down, exiled to the mortal realm, never to return to the heavens again. He accepted his fate, staying with the humans, protecting the very land he had given his all to save. The story of the 10 sons of the East reminds us of Phaethon in Greek mythology. Unable to control his father's sun chariot, Phaethon scorched the earth and met a tragic end under Zeus's thunderbolt. Regardless of the culture, the story of the blazing sun reminds us of the fragility of our earth and the precious value of peace. We shall now continue the story of the hero Hou Yi. But tonight we do not speak of the glorious feats of shooting down the suns. Instead, we turn to the melancholy of earthly love and the heavy heart of a hero in exile. After his great deed of saving the world, Hou Yi believed he would be rewarded by the celestial emperor. Unexpectedly, he was stripped of his divine status and banished to the mortal realm to live as a common man. His heart grew heavy with bitterness and resentment. His beautiful wife Chang'e also had to suffer this banishment because of him. Sorrow changed Hou Yi. He spent his days wandering aimlessly, seeking distraction, rarely staying at home. The distance between him and Chang'e, the wife who had once shared his every breath, grew wider with each passing day, their love fading like old paint under the weathering of time. One day, his aimless footsteps led him to the banks of the Luo River. It was a breathtakingly beautiful river, with gentle waters flowing past wide banks shaded by lush green trees and blooming flowers. Amidst this poetic scenery, he encountered a goddess of peerless beauty playing with the river spirits. Her radiance caused Hou Yi's cold heart to suddenly skip a beat. This goddess was Luo Shen, the spirit of the Luo River. She was the daughter of the ancient god Fuxi, who had tragically drowned in these waters and was appointed as their guardian. She was also the wife of Hebo, the majestic god of the Yellow River. However, Hebo was a wanderer at heart, often abandoning his wife to seek pleasure elsewhere. And so, the beautiful Luo Shen always carried a deep, solitary sorrow within her soul. Two lonely hearts met between heaven and earth. Hou Yi was captivated by her beauty, and she was moved by the rugged, weathered strength of the hero who saved the world. Affection blossomed. In a moment of escape, they dove together into the cool crystal waters of the Luo River, entrusting their hearts to the current and forgetting the troubles of the mortal world. But secrets in the deep do not stay hidden forever. The creatures of the river, bottom the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, saw them. The news flew swiftly to Hebo. The god of the Yellow River flew into a rage when he learned his wife had given her heart to another. Yet Hebo knew that Hou Yi possessed earth-shattering strength. This was the man who had shot down 9 suns, so he dared not challenge him openly. Instead, Hebo used his magic to transform himself into a white dragon. He flew silently to the banks of the Luo River, hiding in the waves to spy. But Hou Yi possessed the sharp eyes of a divine archer. He caught a glimpse of the white dragon lurking in the water, moving with suspicious stealth. Thinking it was a monster waiting to harm the people, he instinctively drew his bow. The arrow tore through the wind with absolute precision, striking the dragon's left eye. Hebo, screaming in pain, reverted to his true form. Furious and terrified, clutching his wounded eye, he ran straight to the celestial court to cry for justice. He wept before the emperor, accusing Hou Yi of plotting to murder a river god. The celestial emperor, solemn and wise, asked for the full story. Hebo dared not lie and admitted he had transformed into a dragon to spy in secret. Upon hearing this, the emperor ruled, "You are a god of high standing. If you had walked openly in your true form, who would have dared to touch you? But you chose to skulk in the shadows, disguised as a beast. Seeing a dragon lurking, it is only natural for a hero to think it a monster. Hou Yi shot you to protect the people. He has committed no crime. The emperor's fair judgment left He Bo speechless. He had lost an eye, received a scolding, and could do nothing against his rival. Swallowing his bitterness, he returned to the Yellow River. Knowing he could not stop the bond between Hou Yi and the goddess, he eventually let it be returning to his own wandering ways. The Luo River returned to its peaceful rhythm, drifting slowly as if the hidden waves of passion and conflict had never churned beneath its surface. The stories of the gods, it seems, are filled with the same joys and sorrows as those of us here on earth. After his glorious victories and his unfinished loves, Hou Yi suddenly realized that the weight of time was pressing upon him. Having lost his divine status, he was now just like any other mortal, forced to face the inevitable cycle of birth, aging, and return to the dust. Desperate to cling to life, Hou Yi resolved to find the elixir of immortality. His mind turned to the Queen Mother of the West on the mystical peaks of Kunlun. Summoning his remaining strength, Hou Yi crossed the sea of flames at the fiery mountain, braved the bottomless weak-water river, and finally ascended the sacred summit. Moved by his sincerity and his past deeds of saving the world, the Queen Mother bestowed upon him the precious elixir. Overjoyed, Hou Yi brought the medicine home. He hid it carefully, planning to wait for an auspicious day to drink it. But fate is a fickle thing. He did not know that tragedy was waiting for him within his own home. Chang'e, the wife who had once shared his pillow, still harbored deep sorrow and resentment over his affair with the river goddess. She longed for a way to leave the husband whose heart had strayed. Knowing Hou Yi possessed the divine medicine, a thought took root in her mind: she would take it for herself. Yet fearful of the unknown, she first sought out a famous fortune teller named Yu Huang. The diviner cast the oracle and spoke, "This omen is strange indeed. A woman of extraordinary spirit will fly alone to the distant west. The journey is perilous, but the destination is radiant. The future is bright, and descendants will be as numerous as the stars." Emboldened by this prophecy, Chang'e waited for her moment. She stole the elixir and drank it all. Immediately, her body became light as a feather. She drifted up from the ground, floating higher and higher, fleeing straight toward the cold silver moon. But the moment her feet touched the moon's surface, a terrifying transformation took hold. Her beautiful eyes began to bulge, her neck shrank, her belly swelled, and her skin, once white as snow, turned rough brown and covered in warts. She tried to call out, but her voice was gone, replaced only by a strange croaking sound. The breathtaking Chang'e of the past had transformed into a giant toad, destined to hop heavily across the cold lunar soil forever. Had the fortune teller lied? Perhaps not. The moon shines brightly, promising a radiant future, and a toad lays thousands of eggs, fulfilling the promise of numerous descendants. The ancients, gazing up at the moon and seeing the dark cratered shadows, imagined the rough skin of a toad, weaving this haunting tale during the Han Dynasty. But the human heart always yearns for beauty. By the time of the Southern and Northern dynasties, the story was retold with a gentler touch. In this version, Chang'e did not drink the elixir out of greed, but to protect it. While Hou Yi was away, his wicked apprentice, Feng Meng, tried to seize the medicine. In a desperate act, Chang'e swallowed it herself. She floated to the moon, retaining her ethereal beauty as a fairy. However, the price she paid was eternal loneliness in the frigid Guanghan palace, with only an old cinnamon tree and the jade rabbit who pounds medicine day and night for company. As for Hou Yi, having lost his wife and his hope for immortality, he fell into deep despair. In the end, the hero's life concluded in tragedy. He was assassinated by that same jealous apprentice, Feng Meng, who sought to claim the title of the greatest archer under heaven. That is what the myths tell us. But in the flow of history, through ancient texts like the bamboo annals, Hou Yi appears in a different portrait, more realistic and stark. History records that Hou Yi was the king of the Yuqiang tribe, a vassal of the Xia dynasty. He possessed strength beyond measure and archery skills unmatched in the world. At that time, the king of Xia Taikang was obsessed with hunting and neglected his kingdom. Seizing the opportunity while Taikang was away on a hunt, Hou Yi blocked his return, usurped the throne, and forced the king into exile until his death. But upon reaching the pinnacle of power, Hou Yi walked the same path as the man he replaced. He became arrogant, ignoring the affairs of the state, drowning his days in wine and hunting. He placed all his trust in a minister named Han Zhuo, giving him all power so he could enjoy his pleasures. He did not know that Han Zhuo was a man with honey on his lips, but a dagger in his heart. Han Zhuo flattered him outwardly while plotting to steal the throne and even Hou Yi's wife. One day while hunting, when Hou Yi lay drunk and unconscious, Han Zhuo assassinated him, ending the 8-year reign of the Archer King. Tragedy followed tragedy. Hou Yi's sons were killed and his wife was taken by the usurper. It was not until much later that the Xia bloodline was restored. Whether in the flight of mythology or the harshness of history, the story of Hou Yi leaves us with deep reflections on fame, love, and the impermanence of life. Our story begins in the peaceful land of Yaoshu. Here, Shun, the 8th generation descendant of the Yellow Emperor, was born into a humble family. His father was named Gusu, and his mother was Wu Deng. His arrival in this world was heralded by beautiful and auspicious signs. One day, just as the rain had ceased and the golden sunlight broke through the clouds, a brilliant rainbow arched across the sky. Lady Wu Deng, gazing up at this magnificent union of heaven and earth, felt a spiritual connection and conceived a child. On the night before Shun was born, his father dreamed of a resplendent phoenix descending from the high heavens. The bird spoke, calling itself his son, and gently fed him grains of pearl-like rice. The ancient Book of Dreams tells us this was a sign that a truly noble soul was about to be born. When Shun let out his first cry, his eyes shone with an extraordinary intelligence. Most mysteriously, like the wise Emperor Yao Shun, possessed double pupils in each eye, a sign of one who sees the world with profound clarity. But fate often tests those it intends to make great. His mother passed away while he was still young, and his father's eyes slowly failed him until he went completely blind. People came to call him Gusu, the blind old man. From a tender age, Shun took it upon himself to care for his father with gentle hands. Eventually, his father remarried. His stepmother gave birth to a son named Xiang and a daughter. Blinded not just in sight, but in heart, and poisoned by whispers of malice, Gusu began to loathe Shun while doting on the younger son. Yet despite the coldness and the harsh treatment from his family, Shun remained steadfast in his love. When struck, he endured it silently, without a word of complaint, his heart remaining open and kind to his brother. But the jealousy in his stepmother's heart burned like a toxic flame. She urged her husband to find a way to remove Shun forever. One day they ordered Shun to descend into a dry well to clean it. Shun obediently climbed down. While he was working deep in the dark, damp earth, they heartlessly rolled a giant stone to seal the mouth of the well. Trapped in the cold darkness, Shun felt a deep sorrow. Yet he did not lose faith. His pure heart moved the heavens. A miracle occurred. The wall of the well suddenly opened to reveal a secret underground tunnel, a dragon's path leading to a neighbor's well, allowing Shun to escape with his life. Although he survived, Shun did not return home, immediately fearing his father would bear the heavy name of a murderer. He quietly traveled to the wild lands of Mount Li to make a living. At Mount Li, Shun's virtue shone like the morning sun. Drawn by his character, people flocked to settle near him. Within 1 year, the wilderness became a village. Within 2, a town. And by the 3rd year, it was a bustling city where people lived in humility and love. Rumors of this virtuous young man reached the ears of Emperor Yao. The aging king, seeking a successor, decided to test Shun. He gave his 2 beautiful daughters, Wang and Nüying, to Shun in marriage. Even with a happy home of his own, Shun's heart still ached for his father. He took his wives back to his childhood home to serve his parents. But alas, old habits run deep. His family still sought a chance to harm him. One day, Gusu ordered Shun to climb up and repair the roof of the towering granary. Shun's wise wives, sensing danger, gave him a special coat embroidered with bird patterns and whispered a warning. True to their fears, the moment Shun reached the roof, his father and brother set fire to the building from below. The flames roared to life, swallowing the granary in a sea of fire. With no way down, Shun took a leap of faith. Miraculously, the bird-patterned coat he wore caught the updraft. It spread wide like the wings of a phoenix, carrying him gently through the smoke to land softly safe and sound upon the earth. Having witnessed Shun survive every trial with grace, Emperor Yao knew he had found the one. He entrusted Shun with the affairs of the state, which flourished under his hand. For a final test, Yao sent Shun alone into a dense, dangerous forest. Amidst violent storms, thunder, and lightning, Shun walked with a calm, steady step. The tigers and leopards bowed their heads to let him pass. The vipers dared not approach. He returned in peace, proving he carried the mandate of heaven. Emperor Yao abdicated, and Shun became Emperor Shun, the wise ruler of all under heaven. The very first thing he did after ascending the throne was to return to his old home. There, the emperor of the world knelt humbly before his blind father and stepmother, just as he had done as a boy. In that moment, Gusu finally realized the truth. The son he had cast aside was indeed the phoenix from his dream so long ago. Tears of late regret flowed, but Shun spoke no words of blame, only words of forgiveness and love. He even bestowed a title upon his brother Chang'e, who, moved by his brother's boundless heart, washed away his past malice to become a good and noble man. The story of Emperor Shun whispers to us across the ages, reminding us that a heart of filial love and forgiveness is powerful enough to move the sky, dissolve hatred, and bring about the most peaceful of endings. Here is the translation for part 22. For this chapter, I have navigated the tragic elements of the story with a solemn, respectful tone. The focus shifts from the chaos of the flood to the mystical, dreamlike birth of the dragon, creating a sense of awe and quiet resolve suitable for a bedtime narrative. Our story begins in the twilight years of Emperor Yao's reign. Although he had governed the world for over 70 years in peace, nature in its vastness is often unpredictable. No sooner had the great droughts passed than the floods began to rise. The cause of this great deluge was the reawakening of the water god Gong Gong. After his defeat by Zhuanshu long ago, he had hidden himself in the deep dark pools. Now, as the times changed, Gonggong rose again, causing 100 rivers to flow backward. The waters surged, submerging the human world in a boundless, endless sea, year after year. Emperor Yao was consumed with worry. He summoned his court to find a sage capable of taming the waters. Amidst the anxious assembly, the ministers unanimously recommended a man named Gun. Emperor Yao hesitated for a moment, for he saw that Gun possessed a proud and stubborn nature, and he feared Gun might struggle to carry such a heavy burden. But looking across the world, there was no one else with the strength to try, and so he entrusted his hope to Gun. Gun accepted the command, though his heart was filled with heavy thoughts. He sought out the great diviner, De Ming, to ask for a prophecy about the future. The diviner cast the oracle, then shook his head and sighed. This task holds no good fortune. There is a beginning, but there will be no end. Although he knew the will of heaven was against him, Gun looked upon the suffering people and could not turn away. He resolved to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. For 9 long years, Gun poured all his strength into building dams to block the flood. But water is soft, yet ruthless. If the dam rose 1 foot, the water rose 1 foot to match it. Every barrier he built was eventually swept away by the furious currents. All of Gun's efforts seemed to be sinking into despair. Just as Gun was lost in sorrow, a wise owl and a divine turtle appeared to offer him a plan. They whispered to him of a treasure in the celestial court, known as the breathing earth, or Zhirang. This was no ordinary soil. It was a live, magical earth that could grow and multiply on its own. If just a small piece were thrown into the water, the breathing earth would swell and expand, transforming into towering mountains that could block even the fiercest waters. Hearing this, Gun felt like a drowning man catching a floating log. Risking everything, he ascended to the celestial court and stole the breathing earth to bring down to the mortal world. He cast a small clod of the divine soil into the floodwaters. Miraculously, from that spot, great mounds of earth began to rise. They swelled and stretched, growing higher and higher, forming solid walls that pushed back the dark waters. The great flood temporarily subsided, and the people filled with joy returned to their old homes. But happiness is often fragile. High in the heavens, the celestial emperor discovered the theft of his treasure and flew into a thunderous rage. He sent Zhurong, the god of fire, down to the mortal realm. Gun was captured and taken to the cold, desolate peaks of Mount Yu to face execution. The emperor reclaimed the breathing earth, and just like that, the floodwaters roared back, drowning the world once more. This deluge would last until the time of Emperor Shun. As for Gun, though he had paid the ultimate price, his body lay upon Mount Yu for 3 years without decaying. His spirit remained restless, his heart still heavy with the unfinished task of saving the world. The celestial emperor, fearing Gun might revive and cause chaos, ordered a guard to open Gun's belly with a blade. But in that moment, a miracle occurred. As the wound opened, there was no blood, but a blinding flash of light. From within Gun's body, a magnificent golden dragon soared out, flying straight up to the 9 blue heavens. This dragon carried the will and the life force of his father. This was Yu, known to history as Yu the Great, the son who would write the next chapter of the legend. After Yu was born, Gun's earthly body transformed into a dark brown 3-legged turtle. He quietly crawled down into the deep waters at the foot of Mount Yu, continuing to watch over the flow of the rivers in silence. It was a tragic sacrifice to sow the seeds of a new legend. The father dissolved into the deep waters, and the son ascended as a dragon to the high skies, promising a brighter future for all of humanity. Here's the translation for the final chapter, part 23. I have designed this conclusion to be the most soothing of all, with a rhythmic flow that mimics the gentle movement of water. The ending transitions slowly from the story into a direct relaxation guide to help the listener fall asleep immediately. After Gun passed away, leaving behind his unfinished dream and the restless floodwaters, Emperor Shun continued to worry day and night for the fate of his people. Although Gun had failed, Emperor Shun, with his keen and wise eyes, saw an extraordinary spirit in Gun's son. This was Yu, the man born from the golden dragon that soared to the heavens. Shun decided to summon Yu and entrust him with the heavy burden of taming the waters. Moved by the loyal and unyielding hearts of both father and son, the celestial emperor, this time granted his permission. He bestowed the breathing earth, the magical soil that grows and multiplies upon Yu to save the world. Carrying this great mission, Yu understood that to truly tame the flood, he first had to quell the water god Gong, who was churning the chaotic waves. Yu summoned all the gods and spirits under heaven to the peak of Mount Mao to discuss a strategy. Because this became the place where the deities gathered to calculate their great plans, the mountain was later renamed Mount Kuaiji, meaning the meeting of assessments. On that day, the atmosphere on the peak was incredibly solemn. Gods from the 4 winds and 8 directions arrived in haste, riding clouds and driving the mist to be on time. Only one deity arrived late, moving with a slow, leisurely arrogance. Imagine a giant standing over 30 feet tall with the majestic head of a dragon, the ears of an ox, and a single eye in the center of his forehead. This was Fang Shi. His lateness and disrespectful attitude broke the solemnity of the gathering. Yu, with the presence of a supreme commander, swallowed his mercy and ordered the execution of Fang Shi to establish discipline. Because Fang Shi was so colossal, the executioner could not reach his neck. They had to build a high earthen platform just to carry out the sentence. Witnessing this strict justice, thousands of gods held their breath in awe. From that moment, they followed Yu's command with a single heart. Under his leadership, the army of spirits bravely drove away Gong, removing the source of the disaster. But the trials were not over. Gong's lieutenant, the 9-headed Hydra Xiangliu, still lurked in the shadows. Its blood was incredibly toxic. Wherever it flowed, plants withered, and the land became barren. Yu eventually defeated the monster, but its foul blood seeped into the earth, creating deadly poisonous swamps. Patiently, Yu brought fresh, good soil to fill them. But as soon as he filled them, the earth would sink. 3 times he filled it, and 3 times it collapsed. Refusing to give up, Yu decided to dig a massive lake instead, and on its banks he built a majestic altar to the Celestial Emperor to suppress the evil energy. Finally, the land found peace. With the monsters gone, Yu began the great work of reshaping the mountains and rivers. He cast pieces of the breathing earth into the deep waters. The divine soil met the water and multiplied, rising into rolling hills and sturdy mountains, breaking the endless expanse of the flood. But unlike his father, Yu understood a fundamental truth. Water must flow. Blocking it was not enough. He had to guide it back to the sea. He began the greatest labor of his life, dredging the rivers. He focused on opening the path for the Yellow River in the north. The mother river of civilization was guided into a proper channel flowing peacefully through the central plains, nourishing the fields instead of drowning them. When the waters were finally tamed and the world was at peace, the trees turned green once more. You sent people to measure the entire land, dividing the vast central plains into 9 regions known as the 9 provinces, or Zhuzhou. A new order of civilization and prosperity was established. Recognizing a merit as vast as the sky and sea, the aging Emperor Shun decided to pass the throne to Yu. And so he became Yu the Great, the first king of the Xia dynasty, opening a new chapter in human history. And now, let your mind visualize the peaceful land of the 9 provinces. See the rivers winding gently, carrying fresh water to the great sea. See the fields of golden grain stretching out beneath the silent shadow of Mount Quaiji. The storms have passed. All that remains is tranquility and abundance. The stories of the gods, the battles to protect the world, and the noble sacrifices of the ancients have now receded into the past, becoming part of the dust of time. The world is at peace. The sky above is still a deep protective blue, and the earth below is vast and steady, holding us safely every day. At this moment, let us put aside the thoughts and worries of the present. The gods of legend have completed their missions, and you too have completed the work of your long day. It is time for your body and soul to find their perfect rest. I wish you a sleep that is deep and peaceful, filled with your own magical dreams. Thank you for listening. Good night, and until we meet again.